Hey, welcome to the Platinum Pinfall. Today is January 18th. And this is, of course, going to go to my Patreon people first. And um, this is the 7th day I've done it. You know what that means? I'm going to compile a week at a time. So this will be part of, I know that I release these to the public. I tend to release them a couple days after they come out. Um, but I'm going to compile them a week at a time and put that up as a separate YouTube video because people seem very interested in them. And some people like longer formats and whatever. In any case, our three stories today are different than they have been. Let's start with this. What is that a picture of? Today's a more contemplative edition. So that's a picture of Stephanie McMahon and Shane McMahon. And what it reminded me of is how different the wrestling world has changed and what our perception of what the possibilities are. We talk a lot, and I talk a lot on Full Disclosure, about how the wrestling world is changing and in many ways for the better. I think the boys have more control. I think this idea that the WWE is the end-all be-all has left for the most part, and people feel empowered to come up with their own stuff. If you look at the Georgia Wrestling History Awards, most of that stuff is a testament to the boys' own efforts, not being booked into positions and booked into gimmicks, but coming up with their own stuff, and fans and promotions benefiting from that. I think that's all great. But this Stephanie McMahon, Shane McMahon picture reminds me of a time when people just assumed they were going to take over the company, and then Triple H was going to take over the company, and now it looks like none of them are going to take over the company. And in fact, if you look at scenarios where the WWE is sold or Nick Khan is in charge of absolutely everything, it's hard to imagine that there'll even be a place for the McMahon children or for Triple H. Again, it's the kind of story or the kind of thought-provoking thing I just want to throw out there. Can you believe? Because, boy, it wasn't that long ago where people were like, inevitably look at the great stuff happening at NXT and the Performance Center. Triple H is going to take over once Vince McMahon goes away, or for whatever reason, Triple H will take over and things will get better. And it's this family business, and it's always going to be a family business, and any discussions about selling the WWE means you got to make sure that Stephanie and Shane and these people are taken care of and put in a prominent position. None of that feels real anymore. Oh, once Triple H takes over, he'll get rid of Kevin Dunn and we can start doing different stuff. None of that feels like it's going to happen anymore. I just find it very interesting and noteworthy. Story number 2. I finished Butts and Seats. It's a comic book. It's 12 different artists, 10 chapters. How is it? It's very good. But it's also very expensive, right? $25 normally. Did I enjoy it? I did. It definitely left me wanting more detail in the stories. I felt like the comic book aspect of it only was really taken advantage of on 3 specific occasions. Otherwise, it feels like, why did this have to be a comic book? Except that it gets through stories in a much more efficient fashion because it is a comic book. But it felt like it only took advantage of the comic book format on 2 or 3 different occasions. Do I enjoy it? I'm glad I have it? Of course I'm glad I have it. Did I enjoy it thoroughly? For what is here, I absolutely enjoyed it, and it just made me want to hear more and learn more and know more. And unfortunately, things weren't in great detail, because how could they be? I did love the story of how Tony Schiavone got introduced to pro wrestling in general and how he worked his way up. I love the stuff where they wove in his real life and the considerations that he had to make, having a wife and children, and the decisions he had to make accordingly, and how cautious the wrestling business made him. And then, of course, the stories at the end where he by his own description goes, okay, I know this is what you want. So here's a story about Barry Windham. Here's a story about Bobby Heenan. Here's a story about Sting and Flair and Wahoo McDaniel and stuff, and that part's really great. But this thing, I guess the long and short of it is, it just made me want more, which is a good thing. And also, if I'm being honest, a vaguely unsatisfying thing. But I do feel like I know Tony Schiavone better. And so in that sense, it is incredibly successful. And Tony Schiavone just seems like the kind of dude you want to know. Really great guy, really honest about stuff. On the honesty scale, this is amongst the tops of any wrestling thing I've read. As far as making you want more, it's the absolute top. But as far as feeling like a truly fulfilling experience, inevitably it couldn't do that just because of the format. But I do feel very unsatisfied, if I'm being honest. But it's lovely. And it will have a prominent spot where people can and should read it whenever they come and see me. Finally, cringe wrestling takes. Find them on Twitter. It's not a secret that Twitter is poison. It's not a secret that Twitter, when it comes to pro wrestling, is some of the most horrible stuff. It's hard to really like any fan base once you see them in action on Twitter. But if, like me, there's a kind of a perverse pleasure in the worst of it, cringe wrestling takes on Twitter is well worth joining and reading. And I said this in my commentary, we have to develop this mentality of two things can be true, and more nuanced takes. And cringe wrestling takes really shows you why more nuance is in order. And the person who does the cringe wrestling takes does a great job. They take submissions and then they pick the cringiest of the cringe and put them up there. Because I always have a video clip, I want to leave you with one. This one was a response of at the end of the Dallas Cowboys football game. And while it's not directly wrestling related, this thing is so awesomely over the top crazy. It did definitely remind me of wrestling fans. In any case, that's 1, 2, 3 stories about pro wrestling. Thank you for joining me for the Platinum Pinfall.